Howdy. Welcome back to Dion Talk. There's a chance you found my channel because you are on the path to financial freedom. And that's the goal of my channel, to teach the average individual that you can reach financial freedom in 10 years or less, even if you're not starting from the best position. So like me, you've probably come across videos where people point out the differences between rich and wealthy or poor, or things rich people teach their kids that poor people don't, or kind of silly videos that say things like the rich shower more often, which to me seems a little off because when I was poor, I had jobs that were kind of dirty, so I ended up showering a few times a day. So I don't actually understand that one. I started out a little more than 10 years ago as a single parent with 3 kids, only making $17 an hour. And in the divorce, I found out about $89,000 in bad debt in my name that I didn't know existed. So I consider myself able to speak from the perspective of being poor. But if you flash forward a few years till now, I'm financially independent. Work is completely optional. I have cash flow from rental properties that is at least 3 times what it costs me to live. So my goal now is to share how I got here with as many people as I can to help them do the same thing. So in this video, I feel qualified to talk from both positions of somebody who's wealthy and somebody who's been poor. Instead of focusing on the differences between being wealthy and being poor, I'm going to look at it from a different angle. I'm going to talk about several things that people who are wealthy and people who are poor do almost exactly the same. Almost. Some of these might be things that you've thought of, and my goal is to maybe point out something you haven't thought of before so that you can look at things from a new perspective. Because a mindset shift is the best way for us to change our path and to actually reach financial freedom. The things that I'm going to talk about might be things that you've already thought of. My goal is to hopefully point out something you haven't considered before and help you have a mental shift, because mindset is huge on if we become wealthy or poor. And my goal is to help you become the one that you want to be. It's wealthy, right? Wealthy is the one they want to be. Let's start with a simple one. A lot of wealthy people have RVs, like this one that my friends purchased. I actually flew to Texas and drove this to Arizona for them. My friends purchased this with the goal of traveling the country, taking vacations, and having most of the comforts that they have from home. What's the point of financial freedom if you can't help friends? But a lot of poor people have RVs too. Sometimes they live in them and they go from Walmart parking lot to parking lot. Sometimes it's a family who's renting, whose family has outgrown the size of the house, and they might not be able to afford to rent a larger place, but sometimes poor families will buy an RV, park it next to the house, and create more living space. So instead of something that you use for vacations, it becomes the teenager's room. So sometimes wealthy and poor people do things that are almost the same. Almost. Some things that the wealthy and poor do look very different, but again, are almost the same. Sometimes wealthy and poor people skip some of the problems that impact more of the middle class. The wealthy and the poor often don't pay a lot of income tax. This is something I've been on both sides of. In 2019, a little over 40% of households in the United States paid 0 income tax. In 2020, with the pandemic, that number went above 60, but I don't think that's a good year to use as a metric. But in 2019, 40% of households didn't pay any income tax. Income tax is mostly a middle class issue. A lot of wealthy people follow Robert Kiyosaki's first rule in his book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The rich do not work for money. A lot of wealthy people's income doesn't come from a W-2. My rental profit is over 3 times what it costs me to live, but because of tax benefits like depreciation and write-offs, I've never paid a penny in income tax on rental profit. And for a lot of years, when I was poor, I didn't actually make enough money to have a tax obligation, especially when you factor in things like earned income credit and child tax credit. For the wealthy and the poor, taxes are almost the same. Almost. It really is the middle class that ends up with taxes as one of their largest expenses. After taxes, cars are something that's very similar for wealthy people and poor people. When I was poor, I had more cars than I can use. I usually paid between $500 and $2,000 for a car, but I had to have at least 3, hoping that one of them would run well enough to get me to work. And sometimes poor people will buy 2 of the same car. one probably doesn't run, and it becomes a parts car that gets cannibalized. Because when you're poor, it's actually cheaper to buy a couple $100 car than it is to buy a starter, an alternator, and those mismatched colored fenders that eventually you think you're going to need. When I became a police officer, the other officers in my department actually called my vehicles rolling PC. At the same time, wealthy people often have more cars too. They'll usually have a car for each adult, a car for the teenagers, a car for their winter home, a car for their summer home, a car for when that midlife crisis happens, their errand vehicle. So when you look at it from a distance, this is something that looks like wealthy and poor people do almost the same. After we look at vehicles, the next thing that I think that poor people and wealthy people do that looks almost the same is that they use credit cards. When I was poor, and I found out about $89,000 in bad debt in my name that I didn't know existed until the divorce, most of that debt was credit cards. When poor people start using credit because ends don't meet, it quickly spirals out of control. So when I finally worked my way through of getting out of that $89,000 in bad debt, and someday I'm going to make a video explaining how to actually get out of that much bad debt when you're not making a lot of money.
But not today.
But now that I'm wealthy, instead of thinking I never want to see a credit card again, I've realized that credit cards are tools. I never carry a balance, and I use the credit card for everything that I was going to purchase anyways. Wealthy people use credit cards like a tool to get their travel points, or like I do, I like to get the cash back. Cash is money. Money is that thing we like. So if you're going to use credit cards, make sure it's a tool you use right. After credit cards, there's something else that wealthy people and poor people do that looks almost the same, is that they both benefit from government programs. I own 16 rental units. It's actually how I reached financial freedom. And I like to keep 1/3 of my units rented to the Section 8 program. This way, if there's ever a stock market crash or a pandemic, or if a big company in my area closes down, I don't lose all of my tenants, and I still have some tenants making rent. There are also some programs that poor people benefit from. We do have Section 8, low-income housing, EBT or food stamps, child daycare subsidies, welfare, state medical. There's a lot of programs that the wealthy benefit from and a lot of programs that poor people benefit from that generally aren't options for the middle class. Another thing that wealthy people and poor people usually have in common is that they have a lot of debt. A lot of times when I'm talking with friends who have a poor mindset, and I don't mean that their mindset is poor, I mean that they have a mindset that keeps making them make decisions that keeps them poor. I'm not generalizing, I'm actually talking about conversations I've had with friends. They usually say things like, I wish I had no debt. I would really like to be debt-free. I even felt this way for years. I even ended up making this video that explained how it was more debt that helped me reach financial freedom. It's the type of debt that makes the difference. When we're poor, we usually have debt from credit cards, or worse, payday loan advances, which have astronomical fees associated with them, and student loans. And yes, I understand that student loans can be considered good debt if it leads to a better career, but does it? Student loan debt is like Schrodinger's debt. We don't know if it's good or bad until we see the outcome. A lot of times, poor people will have debt on cars and houses, and often buying more car and more house than they need. For wealthy, we tend to look for debt that pays us more than the debt service cost, like a mortgage on rental properties that has positive cash flow, or a business loan that lets you start and grow a business that makes you money. Debt is a tool, like a chainsaw. If you use it right, it can help you reach financial freedom. If you use it wrong, it can cut you, like my brother Dale did when he cut me on the leg on a job site in front of the customer. Good times. Pretty sure it was an accident. There are times when things happen that are out of our control. You can lose a job, you can have a health concern pop up, and you can take a significant financial hit. But most days, we make choices. Are you making choices that help you reach financial freedom, or are you making choices that are going to keep you poor? If we always do what we've always done, we'll always be what we've always been. I hope I made you think. Until my next video, thanks for coming to my Dion Talk.
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.